How can we learn from the leaders, educators, and experts in our industry? What can we take away from their successes and failures? How can we apply this to our businesses, our careers, and our lives? This is what we are here to find out. I'm your host, Karthik Chidambaram, CEO of DC Cap. We make systems, talk to each other for manufacturers and distributors. I love to learn and share the knowledge with others. This podcast is about having meaningful conversations that we can all learn from. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this conversation.
How are you going to go about using AI in your company is a big deal.
Everybody's talking about AI being a wave, a monstrous wave, or some say it's a tsunami. Again, all that is true.
I firmly believe that the organizations that are going to prosper in an AI technology area are not the organizations with the biggest budgets and the most impressive IT teams. So all of a sudden, we see these little upstarts from Perplexity, OpenAI, Anthropic, and others jump into the search market, which we all thought was entirely owned by Google. And they are able to pull out $56 billion every year in profit. This is not an opportunity where they might be able to use AI capabilities for improving top or bottom line over the next 5 to 10 years. This is instead going to be something that happens quite quickly.
But let's say I am working in a warehouse or I'm working for a distributor. Yeah. What AI skills do I need as somebody working in a warehouse, or how should I be approaching AI?
The thing that I probably want to keep my eye on is...
We're joined by a very special guest in Austin, Texas, Brooks Hamilton. We're going to talk about AI strategy for distributors. Brooks, welcome to the Driven Podcast. Great to see you in Austin, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Karthik. I've enjoyed so many of your episodes before, learned a ton, very excited to be here.
So Brooks, in preparation to the podcast, I was reading up on your work. I read your Medium blogs, and I was fascinated by it. The different things you had wrote on AI, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI. I thought it was really, really cool. So thank you for writing.
Thank you.
So let's get started with AI strategy. AI here, AI there, AI everywhere. And that's what we are hearing. Sometimes it's like, hey, what's really happening? It's just too much confusing, right?
It is.
So, I'm really glad we are talking to you today because every company needs an AI strategy, especially distributors. That's who we primarily work with, and you also do a lot of work for them. And they need an AI strategy. They're not tech companies. So what is an AI strategy and how do I go about it? Let's say I'm a distributor. What is an AI strategy and how do I go about it?
That's a great question. I think AI strategy is going to be one of the most fundamental aspects of distribution as well as large sections of the rest of the economy over the next 5 to 10 years. What's a little bit different about an AI strategy as opposed to some of the tech strategies that we've thought about previously? So as we move to mobile, when we had e-com, is that the pace of this is moving significantly faster than those prior waves. Luckily, I've had the opportunity of watching both of those. And even as a very tight watcher, the field's moving very quickly. So I can certainly understand how somebody who does not look at this day in, day out, as my team and I do, can really get overwhelmed by the amount of media that's heading towards them saying AI, AI. Really what it comes down to for distributors is to understand, where do I have opportunity to drive significant sales, and where do I also have those opportunities of taking costs down in a way that's going to yield both better margins as well as potentially and unusually increased customer and employee satisfaction, which usually we needed to give on one of those aspects before. Now we find we can actually go execute on all of those at the same time and have a positive outcome. So I think that's a little bit of like the backdrop and the opportunity that we see out there. But when we think about an AI strategy, it's more akin to, where do I get started? how do I build the message both internally for my executive and larger employee team, but also how do I go about building the technical capabilities and organizational capabilities that will allow me to compete in the market going forward with my traditional set of competitors as well as potentially a new set.
Let's say I'm a distributor, right? Let's say we do about $50 million in revenue, $100 million in revenue.
Yeah.
So what do I do? Why do I call Brooks? Hey, Brooks, everybody's talking about AI. So let's say you come in. What do you do?
Yeah. There are usually two big aspects that we work on first. One is, do we have a common set of understanding of what is AI and where is it today? Usually we look around our executive team. There may be a few people who are saying, yes, we've really got to jump on this. Another set of people saying, I don't really know what this thing is. And then maybe still another that says, I think I know what this is, and I don't think we want any part of it. So at least trying to get that team all on the same page so that they're working off the same set of facts and then drive towards a consensus about what do we do now that we have these facts is step one. What is the kind of thread of projects that we're going to go work on that yield both a great financial ROI for us, as well as setting up that communication within the organization of how are we going to go do AI as an organization. A little bit more to say about that, but maybe we can get to that in a bit.
So how am I going to use AI, right? So let's say, you talked about strategy. And the key thing is I was actually chatting with a customer of ours, this week in Dallas, right? I was meeting with a customer. He's also a friend, Rajesh Shetty. He is a technology director. He was asking me, hey, what are you guys doing on AI? And I told him, hey, we are experimenting a few things, and I was just talking about it. But he asked a great question. Hey, I'm really glad you're experimenting, but how is your experiment going to impact my business? Experimenting is one thing, and experiments lead to results, and that essentially has an impact. But one question a lot of distributors have is, one of the things he talked about is, hey, you need to drive down cost, or you have to improve efficiency. It needs to be tangible, and we need to be able to see it. So how would you answer, Rajesh?
What I think about is, how are you going to go about using AI in your company is a big deal. There are a lot of different directions and areas in which you can go use it, but there needs to be a guiding principle behind it. And ideally what that should be is you should have great alignment with what is your core value prop that you're bringing to the to the market in general. How do you want to align AI within the market, within your organization? So a quick example there is, do I want to make AI something that my customer base interacts with regularly? Or is it something that I only want the internal portion of my organization to interact with regularly? There are a lot of different ways of applying that. Each organization is going to try to figure out the one that's right for them. And then the second part is, how does it match up with my value structure? So if I'm an organization that is extremely financially KPI driven, then I need to push for those cost changes and revenue growth in order to meet those financial goals. There are other organizations that may be family-owned, employee-owned, have long histories of engagement in between ownership and employees, where the way in which it's going to be used in the organization is going to be quite different. The way in which they may decide to retain employees, to reskill, it is a very different story there. So figuring out right from the beginning, one, how do I enhance my value proposition to the market? And two, how do I stay true to the value set that I've had as an organization is going to matter a ton, because the first couple of projects you go do as an organization is going to communicate an enormous amount about how you see this playing out, because the advent of AI is like outsourcing to third-party countries and a technology revolution wrapped into one. Now we can kind of imagine that's going to create a lot of emotion for people who are in the organization What's going to happen to me? What are the expectations for my job? Am I still relevant? At every point in the organization, they will ask themselves that question. And then depending upon the answer or their perceived answer, they will decide to stay or to walk. And so it's excellent to have a plan in place about how you're going to approach that value prop and your value structure before you ever go launch into what a neat application of the technology may be.
Yeah, really determine your values first, and based on the values, determine the strategy, and then go ahead and execute it. You also talked about people, and during lunch, we were chatting about one of the distributors who's doing so well. They had a great culture. They have a great culture, and but then they are implementing AI, and people are very happy about it, right? Can you talk about that? What exactly is going on there?
Yeah, trying to identify the areas of people's roles. There's inevitably a chunk of work that is crucial to the business and the operation of the business, but nobody likes doing. And every role has these, but sometimes there are entire roles defined for these. We spoke to one electronics distributor. We were talking about part crosses, or part matching, in between, say, market basket RFQs that come in or price updates from vendors. And what they shared with us was they have 100 people dedicated to part matching, which was shocking to me. What we recognize is in smaller organizations, part of somebody's job is that they don't enjoy it. So go find parts where people really enjoy the other parts of their work that they may even have certifications and training on. Let them do that part rather than compare one cell to another in Excel as a way of passing the time at their job. So there's an enormous opportunity here of finding the areas that are drags on overall productivity and key KPIs, really go about alleviating those to drive that progress and getting rid of a lot of that busy work that's not actually adding any value to a customer transaction.
Brooks, we talked about strategy, but then execution is the key thing. So how do you go about executing it? Let's say you come in and we come up with a strategy and we understand. So you talked about patterns. You find the pattern. Let's say people don't really like to do the task.
Yeah.
And then you take that, you try to automate it. Yeah. And what do I really love doing? You talked about certifications. Like I might be really good at it. So let me focus on that. But then whatever I don't like, find the pattern and automate it. Great strategy. And I think it looks great, right? But then how do I go about executing it?
I'll actually do that. That is what so much of this year is going to be about in 2025. So let's kind of go back. We're all familiar with the major software producers that are out there in traditional software. We know our Profit 21s, our SAP, Microsoft, so on. There have been a new set of vendors that have come to the fore related to AI infrastructure. So those are the most popular one, OpenAI, as we all know, with our buddy Sam Altman. And then Google is a major provider as well. And then finally, a company by the name of Anthropic that's done some great work. All three of these vendors had held back a lot of their release of new capabilities until the end of the year and the new year. And what we see now is just an absolute wealth of capabilities that are now provided into the market. So, for example, there's one called computer use that's offered by a number of these, where you can simply say, listen, I would like for you to take the invoice that is in this email, and I'd like you to match that against the prior invoice that we received, as well as a general ledger entry. Great. Now the application can pull open my email, take a look at that document, go over to the application, take a look at this, say within N4 or whatever application I'm necessarily using, Oracle Financials, and do that matching activity, all without me having to walk through that process. It can instead do it itself using the set of tools that are available today that a person has, rather than having to entirely redo their technical suite. So if we think about it, there's one layer of applications which we're all very familiar with from our standard vendors, and we're beginning to see the start of a new layer of capabilities that are able to use those original set of tools in much the same way a human would to complete those tasks.
But then, like you said, right, so as a distributor, as you rightly pointed out, I'm better off using the existing tools and technologies rather than trying to figure out something on my own. Would that be the right approach?
The first thing that we'd want to understand is what kind of capabilities do we have as an organization? If I'm coming from, say, somebody doing 10 to 50 million, chances are I'm really going to focus a ton on my sales organization, my warehousing organization, delivery, and probably not quite as much on my technology organization. So in that case, I'm really going to lean on other vendors, tool vendors, and then potentially also vendors to come in to help me set this up if I need. I'm not going to go try to do it myself. Whereas we know other organizations somewhere in the 100 million and above may have a more robust IT organization that can try these things out themselves. And we know that there's a broad set of tools that are out there to begin to use. These tools are materially easier to configure than what we had in the prior realm of technology and technology providers.
But how do I know which tool to use? There are a zillion tools out there, and how do I know which tool to use?
One, I think it goes, there are a few pieces, and this is really what the work we do to try to help our clients figure out the right path for them. Oftentimes it has to do with where are they in their installed base of applications, their current technical stack. So if I'm a big Microsoft user, maybe that's who I'm comfortable with in terms of where my data is from a security basis. Similarly, if I'm a Google customer, maybe that will make more sense. But there are also an entirely new set of tools that are coming to market, like Bland AI, Happy Robot, and literally hundreds of others that have started to pick off very specific use cases within the distribution industry to try to help with. And so those are things like order entry, customer service, great things that kind of span not just the distribution industry, but accounts payable, accounts receivable, financial tracking, and then some really neat applications for how you can create technology in ways that are far simpler before. So I think that all those are the ways that we see distribution organizations picking some of the more mature vendor areas to move forward with.
Yeah, I think small wins are very important, right? You have small wins, then that motivates the business to invest more to larger projects. So in your experience consulting with multiple companies, multiple distributors, can you talk about, or can you share a story where you went on to a distributor, you did some strategy for them, and there was a small win, it's not big, and then that really built confidence, and then they are ready to invest more. Can you share some real examples, which made a difference?
Yeah. I think one had to do with a rebating application. So they would receive rebate information from a major vendor of theirs. They would receive that on a monthly basis. It was usually a big raw file. They would have to then go through multiple activities of trying to get the information down right and to the minimum amount possible to then create the hundreds of credit memos that would then in turn be sent back to that same vendor to go about collecting on rebates. Which, in a sense, that's great. That's how it kind of should work. But it was costing them multiple people of time to go capture this benefit. So there was a real cost associated with it. And instead, what we said, we looked at it, we thought, wait a minute, we can just collapse this whole thing down so that this process is done very quickly. So we could use just a typical set of automation/ETL tools. And for some of the gray business logic parts, that's where we could go about inserting AI capabilities in really focused ways. And then, bang, now the process works more quickly. Those people do not have to spend time on it. It's just a simple review function. And now that rebate activity has gone from something that costs them money to make money to actually enjoying much more margin on their rebate program, which is fantastic. That's what they would really want from it originally.
Yeah, I love this. I hate filling out rebate forms. I don't know anybody here.
No, nobody loves that.
And if somebody, I want to stay away from it. But I can really relate to how AI can make a big difference here. I think that's a great example. And once they saw that, then that built their confidence and then they want to do more. Is that typically how you see it?
That's exactly right. We're also big proponents of just take small steps. If all you want to do at first is have some of your core corporate team become excellent at using a language model, great. Go do that. Go capture the 10 to 20% productivity improvement that they're going to get out of $20 a month and start there. If you instead want to try out like a small project, fantastic. That is the type of learning that needs to occur within these organizations. And the reason that I use the word need there is that many of them don't recognize that they're on a clock. This is not a opportunity where they might be able to use AI capabilities for improving top or bottom line over the next 5 to 10 years. This is instead going to be something that happens quite quickly, and they need to begin to experiment to find out what works for us, what doesn't, what creates a positive relationship with our customers. Also, what may generate a negative response from our employees, and how do we balance this out in terms of developing this new capability set, which really nobody in the economy has in depth.
And everybody's talking about AI being a wave, a monstrous wave, or some say it's a tsunami. Again, all that is true, but then let's say, how big a team do I need? So let's say if I want to start implementing and testing the waters, how big a team do I need as a distributor or as a manufacturer?
Of course, there's going to be quite a bit of variation depending upon the size of the organization. But let's go back to that, I'm somewhere between $10 and $50 million a year. I would say don't invest in a team at that point. If you have an IT person, really ensure that they deeply understand what is going on with AI. But for teams that are larger, we think that this is something that needs to translate into an AI center of excellence. And that is something which should be staffed with individuals that have a technology background, but also a deep understanding of what it takes for successful change management in an organization. Since the change management aspect is likely going to be the part that is more crucial to success compared to project management or even technical capability at this point.
But let's say I am working in a warehouse or I'm working for a distributor.
Yeah.
What AI skills do I need as somebody working in a warehouse, or how should I be approaching AI?
The thing that I probably want to keep my eye on is the state of robotics, which is moving very quickly at this point. If we think about what was so difficult about robotics before, it's programming every single little activity. Well, what these language models have given us, and what the last round of AI has given us, is a way of translating intent to software. So the robots, or at least the language models, can program the software dynamically for these robots to take action. And what that means is the cost of producing these robots, the cost of software, the cost of training is coming down by orders of magnitude every 6 months. So we expect to see things like $100,000 units available towards the end of this year that will be probably leased back for, say, 25 to 30K a year of robotic workers that are available to do quite a bit of work for about 20 hours, 18 to 20 hours a day. So if I'm working in a warehouse, I'm going to keep my eye on that. On the flip side, if I'm working on the corporate side, what I need to do is really assess my job skills and understand how am I actually adding value to the business in terms of being highly contextually aware. So what is going on with my clients, the market, and the company? And then second, how do I go about creatively approaching certain questions? Because the value is not going to be in how well the email is written, or how many pages the policy manual is, or how in-depth the process diagram is. Instead, AI is going to do all of that for you. But AI needs direction, and it needs creative, context-aware direction. So as I begin to build my skills as somebody working on the corporate side, I need to think about how I am making that difference. How am I going to use AI to get better at my job? And then how can I go about pushing it to solve problems that I might not have even seen as problems before?
Yeah, on the corporate side, be better at prompting, right? So give better prompts, you get better results, and work through it. I think that part is pretty clear. But on the warehouse side, what do I do? I mean, do I upskill myself, or where do I upskill, or should I look for another job?
Yeah, I think these are going to be some really key questions we're going to start working through. In terms of 2025, I don't think that we're really going to see a ton of impact there, but there will be the question of if I'm working in a role which all the tasks in that role can be automated, or 90% of them can be automated with AI, I may need to look for something else. On the flip side, if I'm an owner, let's say we're 2-3 years down the road from today, and I'm going to choose to divest of part of my accounts payable department that has done that work for 30 years, there may not be any account payable roles to go do in the economy, period, in 3 to 4 years. How are you going to go about responsibly working? So this goes back to the question of my core values as an organization. If my core value is achieving the financial KPIs at all costs, I have an answer. On the flip side, if I'm an organization that is employee-owned, family-owned, where there's a very different relationship between the two, then I might need to give some thought to how am I going to handle this as an owner, and what signal is this going to send to everybody else who may not be impacted now, but they may be concerned about being impacted later.
Yeah, have an owner's mindset. Be more transparent about the whole thing. Hey, this is happening. Or let's say if they bring in someone like you not just work with the executives, but for the entire company, right? So maybe you can give a session so people are really aware of this. So it's not really a threat, but then it's more of an education. I think education might go a long way.
Yes, our firm has a strong commitment to figuring out how this can be a net positive societally. So we're not interested in working with organizations that are just going to cut. We believe that that's not the answer. There are many ways of driving value and growth in the organization other than that. And what AI opens up for us is the opportunity of matching our intent, like what we want to do, with the end product, where before the thing that stood in our way is a certain set of skills that we may feel before just impossible to surmount. Like beforehand, you and I were talking about different languages. How do I go about working with an international branch where I thought, oh, no, they speak French or Canadian French or Spanish or whatever. Why is that a limit anymore? It's not. I can just use whatever language I would like because a language model provides for that. Similarly, if I have an idea for, what would be fantastic here is an app that helps me with my route planning, that takes into account my workout schedule or whatever it might be. Developing those applications today is actually amazingly simple. So before, it took years of study and years more of practice in order to develop these applications, but that's not the case any longer. So if going back to kind of the idea of how do I go about adding value to my organization, solving the problems that are there, and then how do I get creative about it and adopting the mindset that there are a lot of barriers that don't apply anymore. That can be immensely liberating. And think about what's possible in an organization where people are not having to spend time matching Excel cells and instead are spending time thinking about what would an awesome flyer look like? Hey, which customer should I go talk to? How can I go prepare for my negotiation and have a back and forth in preparation for it and then get critiqued afterwards, all in the safety of my car on the way home, only talking to AI? That's an incredible opportunity. So we can massively increase in terms of the skills and the output that we have as contributors within an organization that just wasn't even thinkable 2 years ago.
Yeah, we were even talking about price optimization. And as a customer, I don't have to call the customer service rep to find out what the price of the product is. And then with AI, I can figure out the price or dependent on what I need. And then as a customer service or an account manager, you can upsell. Hey, this person is looking at the price multiple times, so there's an upsell opportunity there.
Yeah.
So time well spent, yeah.
That's absolutely time well spent.
So obviously, with these large language models and all that, the big companies are an advantage over the smaller ones. Is that a right observation? Or let's say even a small tech player can just get up there? Or who's going to lead the game, or what are your thoughts there?
Oh man, what a question. That's a multi-trillion-dollar question right there. Let's take it back to distribution for a second and then talk about tech. How's that sound?
Sounds good, yeah.
I firmly believe that the organizations that are going to prosper in an AI technology area are not the organizations with the biggest budgets and the most impressive IT teams. The ones who are really going to get a ton of value out of this, and I think grow in a very nimble way, are the organizations that can make decisions quickly. The neat thing is, a lot of owner-led, employee-led, and family-owned organizations is they can do that. If they are all of the same mind and say, yeah, this is a big deal, and this is going to impact us from an existential basis, they can move on it. Whereas oftentimes if you're coming from a larger organization, the organization may think, yes, that's something that we need to do, but there are many pieces that need to be organized, aligned, budgets restructured, organizations restructured in order to make that a reality. And so they may be great in a longer time frame of being able to be highly successful. But I think in the short term, the prize is going to go to those who are fast and nimble rather than those who are big. And I think we're going to see something similar in the technology space as well. And let's just use one example. How much do you use a language model for search now as opposed to Google?
I use it a lot right now.
And how about 2 years ago? Nothing.
Nothing,
right?
yeah,
Nobody
yeah,
did.
yeah.
So all of a sudden, we see these little upstarts from Perplexity, OpenAI, Anthropic, and others jump into the search market, which we all thought was entirely owned by Google. And they are able to pull out $56 billion every year in profit. So that's a pretty good sized opportunity right there that these other organizations have. So I think it's just another way of seeing this race may go to the nimble, not necessarily the incumbents with the biggest IT and technical portions.
That's very encouraging, not just for the distributors, but even for tech companies.
Companies,
I think it's awesome. Let's say I want to up my skills, and I'm completely new to all these big buzzwords, right? Maybe can you give me a book or two that I should be reading?
Number one book that I recommend is titled Co-Intelligence. And that is by Wharton professor. I think it's really one of the most applicable to business users and to people who have really not touched AI before. Ethan Mollick does an excellent job of keeping the language simple, having very actionable use cases, and just kind of talking about what the implications are. What's neat about that book also is while it's mainly focused on business, it's also focused on education since she's an educator. And I think for those of us with families, it's really interesting to think about what are the skills that our children are going to need in addition to what we need today as workers. So I think it's a great place to begin.
Thank you for the recommendation. And the theme of this podcast is driven. Yeah. So how are you driven?
This really goes back to my love of understanding intelligence. So let's back up just like a little bit and think about what did we know about intelligence 5 years ago? We knew it was something, maybe it had to do with language. Computers seemed to be smart in some ways, but terrible in others. And since then, what we've learned about is that there are laws of intelligence. We know that if we have models with certain characteristics and data with certain characteristics and run these things for a certain amount of time, then we get a particular set of capabilities. We didn't know that before. We had no idea. So just driving towards understanding and seeing how these can be applied more broadly have been a big personal motivator. What I think about in terms of my work within distribution is there are many different types of external competitors. Just like remember Amazon Business coming into on the e-commerce side. We have many new types of competitors who are going to be moving into distribution. And those may be publicly held organizations that are going to buy distributors and modify their processes and go about competing in the market and kind of doing roll-ups. But it may also be coming from the venture capital groups who have formed partnerships with BlackRock and others for financing to go buy industrial organizations and go do the same. Quite quickly, we're going to find that there are entrants into distribution that are entirely different from the types of companies who they were competing against before. The goal of our firm is to help equip those smaller distributors or even larger distributors to be able to compete effectively against these new entrants. And that's our mission.
I would like to end with this question, Brooks. How do you keep yourself updated, or what book are you reading right now?
Yeah, great question. In order to keep updated, right now it's a really constant stream of subscriptions to newsletters and oddly enough, YouTube. Some of the people who I think are really pushing the boundaries and doing a great job in terms of getting facts out about how to use these applications and what's coming out are coming from shows like Andrew Berman, Wes Roth, and multiple others that are doing a great job of letting us know where the tech is and how it's applied. But the other thing that at least I keep my eye on a lot is I read a lot of the research papers that come out of the frontier labs in the US, China, and Europe as a way of trying to understand where the technology is going to be, not just today, but where it's going to be in 6 to 24 months. And if anybody tells you that they know where things are going beyond that time frame, it's just pure speculation at this point.
Brooks, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for being a part of the Driven podcast and great chatting with you.
Likewise. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining our Driven by DC Cap podcast. Your support means a lot to us. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button and subscribe. Consider leaving us a review. Thank you for joining us.